Hello, teachers, and welcome back to Teachers Help Teachers. I'm your host, Esther Yoon, and with me is Lee Kessner. Welcome back, Lee, to the program.
Thank you.
So we're continuing on with the series, the Mastery Learning and Grading series. Last time we spoke about standards-based grading versus traditional grades and what's wrong with them. Today, we're going to connect, another aspect of mastery learning is the mindset. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And Lee and I invited Lee. Lee and I were going to talk about the differences and then how we perceive those differences as teachers and part of it, and as we are a part of the teaching community, what do we see, what kind of mindset do we see in the teaching community, right? Do we see more growth mindset or do we see fixed mindset? And how do we reconcile with either? And then we're also going to talk about how do we cultivate that growth mindset among our students too, because this isn't a student attitude. This is a people attitude, right? People, we fall under growth mindset or a fixed mindset, don't we, Lee? And so I think it's important to talk about it in that context as educators and educators who want to cultivate that in our learners as well. So on that note, let's watch this quick video to just put everything in context. And if I may share my screen with all of you.
People who have a growth mindset believe that intelligence can be developed, while people with a fixed mindset believe that intelligence is a fixed trait. People with a fixed mindset think of intelligence kind of like eye color. They believe that you're born with a certain amount of intelligence and you can't do much to change that. People with a growth mindset think of intelligence more like a muscle. They understand that when you put in effort and challenge yourself, you can get smarter. Just like when you put in effort at the gym and challenge yourself by lifting heavier weights to make your muscles stronger. Think about this statement. You can learn new things, but you can't really change your basic intelligence. People who really agree with this statement have a fixed mindset. People who really disagree with this statement have a growth mindset. And of course, people might be somewhere in the middle. It turns out that the more students disagree with statements like these, the more they have a growth mindset, the better they do in school. This is because students with a growth mindset approach school differently than students with a fixed mindset. They have different goals in school. The main goal for students with a fixed mindset is to show how smart they are, or to hide how unintelligent they are. This makes sense if you think that intelligence is something you either have or you don't have. You want to show that you have it. Students with a fixed mindset will avoid asking questions when they don't understand something because they want to preserve the image that they are smart, or hide that they're not smart. But the main goal for students with a growth mindset is to learn. This also makes a lot of sense. If you think that intelligence is something you can develop, the way you develop your intelligence is by learning new things. So students with a growth mindset will ask questions when they don't understand something, because that's how they'll learn. Similarly, students with a fixed mindset view effort negatively. They think, if I have to try, I must not be very smart at this. While students with a growth mindset view effort as the way that you learn, the way that you get smarter. Where you'll really see a difference in students with fixed and growth mindsets is when they are faced with a challenge or setback. Students with a fixed mindset will give up because they think their setback means they're not smart. But students with a growth mindset actually like challenges. If they already knew how to do something, it wouldn't be an opportunity to learn to develop their intelligence. Given that students with a growth mindset try harder in school, especially in the face of a challenge. It's no surprise that they do better in school.
All right.
A
So,
growth mindset focuses students on learning rather than simply performing well. You can
all right, Lee. So, what spoke to you during that video?
Well, mostly what spoke to me was the part about the effort,
Mm.
and students just feeling, oh, I'm not smart enough for this. I'm not a math person, or I'm not a language arts person. I'm not smart enough. And what it really comes down to is really providing students with goals in small increments, I think, that are achievable to them, so that they see what we want to call little wins. We'll call them little wins. And they're wins that, wait a minute, I did this. Wait, now I can move on to the next step. And now I can move on to the step after that, because I experienced some accomplishment, and that's going to propel me further. And
Are
so
you,
it's important to set up appropriate expectations
are
for
you,
students.
yeah, I'm sorry. Are you talking about learning targets?
Well, I'm talking about appropriate learning targets, and even increments within those targets, that maybe that person isn't ready to accomplish that target yet at this moment, but if you provide them, with a benchmark of maybe halfway there, and then they can go from halfway there to all the way there, and because they are all are capable of accomplishing these goals. It's just the time frame in which some take longer and others take, do it in a faster amount of time.
And I don't know about you, Lee, but I think it takes, in order to really individualized or give those students, each student, that opportunity to meet those goals, right? These personal learning goals. It really takes a flexible, dynamic kind of classroom, right? In a small group setting, right? In some in a small group setting where you're reteaching using research-based strategies to reach these students, so that they can learn, right, and meet those personal learning goals and those targets. um, for me, I can identify with both, being having a fixed mindset and having a growth mindset. So here's what I mean. And I and the video really, um, it's for the student, isn't it? Right? They talk about the student, but I want to say this is an attitude for us as people, right? To think about, because people fall under the fixed mindset or growth mindset, right? And for me, I grew up with a strong fixed mindset. That part where students play the part of being smart, right? Um, I that's who I was as a student, and it was exhausting. And that's who I was as a teacher, as a young teacher. I didn't want to come across as incompetent or not know how to teach. So I played the part as best as I could. And that was so exhausting as a teacher, right? But there was a shift where the principal at the time reached out to me and said, hey, you know what? um, I see you, I see your struggle, and I want to help you. And 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 she reached out to me, but it was then my part to make a decision. do I want to continue to perceive as being a good teacher? Or do I want to accept that, you know what, I don't know everything and I have a lot to learn. And so once I made that decision of I don't know everything and I want to learn, that's when it really freed me up to ask people for help, to get resources into my hand, to then read about the best practices and grow as a teacher. And so this isn't about students, Lee, right? This is about being a person. Where do you want to fall under that spectrum, right? Do you want to stay as a fixed mindset, or do you want to grow? And for me, I want to grow. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and it will, but ultimately, that's where progress and growth, right, happen. Lee, what would you like to say or add on?
Well, what I would add on, because I just in talking to you, I can sense your passion, and I know that you have a passion for athletics and working out, and I know that you have a passion for teaching, right? And because you have passion in a variety of areas, and I'm sure other areas too that I don't know about, that's why you have the growth mindset, because you have taken agency over your own learning. You want to learn about the things that you're passionate about. And because you want to learn about those things that you're passionate about, you make that effort to learn about them. And so that's just human nature. So our job as teachers and as people is to provide those opportunities to our students to be able to learn about things that they're passionate about, so that they want to take agency over their learning. Let them know that mistakes are okay when they are learning and taking their path that they're passionate about. And it's our job to facilitate their learning, to ensure that they're hitting the standards that that we need to make sure that they're hitting, that are age appropriate and grade level appropriate standards, but to know that they can learn about the topics that they're passionate about, that they will want to put the effort forward because they're passionate about it, and that they'll be making mistakes along the way, and those are learning opportunities. And so that's the growth mindset. That's how you get that out of your students.
And you were talking about being passionate about something, right? And I think when you start there, it's very easy then to cultivate a growth mindset within yourself. But honestly, I think my passion for teaching grew as I started to learn more about it. So I would say, start with something you're passionate about, but also be open to possibilities. And whether you're passionate or not, if you're curious and you want to grow, I think that's where it has to start. From my point of view, if you want to grow in a certain area, passion or not, but just that desire, then I think that's a really great place to start. The desire to want to put in the work, to practice, to research. So because, come on, let's face it, right? And for students, right? We're not going to be passionate about everything. But we do have to possess, we do want our students to, at the very least, right? And it's so profound to have the desire to grow, I'm going to learn this. And
But what I
hopefully,
will tell you is that if you find that thing, if you have a student, for example, who says, I love fashion, I love clothes, and I love colors and all this stuff, and you can sit there and say, okay, great, but now we have to learn about angles today, and and everyone needs to know what a right angle is and all this stuff. And and how are you going to learn about volcanoes when you're worrying about whether you're matching your shoes with your top? So, but you can turn that student's passion for fashion, you can turn that into a science and an art project that's gonna, or I'm sorry, a science and a math project that incorporates language arts and visual arts and all of these topics interwoven while still hitting the standard. But this student all of a sudden sees math and angles and drawing lines and taking measurements and converting measurements, because measurement conversion is a big topic, and algebraic function and all of this stuff. And all of a sudden this student is thrilled to be working on fashion as their big capstone project or whatever for the end of this unit. Where and I'll tell you, last year I took a professional development and I loved it. It was so great. And it was called Integrating the Arts. But one component was they gave the teachers recorders, like the musical instruments. And I've never really had much of a desire to play an instrument, but I was like,
those things
okay,
are annoying.
right? Well, yeah, tell that to my children. My children for the whole summer, last summer, were like, oh, brother, here she goes again, the same song. And so I was like, I'd be practicing. I'm like, I'm going to get this recorder down and I can do all these things and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. But you know what? It's not really my passion. And by the end of the summer, I was sort of like, I don't really care whether I learn how to do the recorder. This isn't really it for me. And I put it down, never to return again to this recorder. And so, but here I still am taking these professional developments in like visual arts and STEAM and things like that, because no matter how, difficult the topic or how much work involved, that's what I really want to do. And it kind of leads me to other topics and it allows me to touch upon them. But because I have a passion for that, I'm going to continue with that. And so I guess the hard part is kind of finding that for your students. So you really have to get to know your students to be able to find that for your students so that they can have that opportunity to explore a lot of topics. It's almost like tricking them, that they're exploring all these topics where they're actually hitting standards, but they're actually learning about fashion or they're learning about basketball or whatever it is that they want to learn about.
So on that note, Lee, we're wrapping up a school year, right? And we're in a couple of months, we're going to receive and welcome new students, but we're going to do that remotely. And as teachers who want to cultivate a growth mindset, how do we do that? How do we get to know our students, cultivate a growth mindset in a remote classroom? I have a few ideas. Let me have you answer that first.
Well, I would, having never really been in this situation before, and so what I think I would have to do first is maybe like take a student inventory of just, simply what are your likes, what are your dislikes, how do you think you learn best, what do you enjoy doing? Do you like working on media projects? Do you like art? Do you like math? And so sort of finding a way, I guess, to individualize components of lessons so that everyone feels engaged and has an opportunity to learn in the way that they think they learn best. I think that's where I would start, but what do you think?
Yeah, an inventory, that like a questionnaire. Yeah, that's a great idea. For me, I like streaming videos for remote learning, and so in my lessons, I would address what a growth mindset person would do in learning. So, like for example, if we're doing a phonics lesson or a fluency lesson, and it didn't go as well as they wanted, I tell them, hey, look, this is a recording. So you can always go back, rewind, rewatch, practice a bit more. I could also in that same video or throughout the year um, give them strategies, right, of what good practice looks like, because practice is what it takes to grow and learn. So in the video, I would leave these tips and strategies to grow as a student, but also I want to do a lot more office hours next year, where they can drop in and talk to me, right, one to one, and that way I can build a relationship with my new students in that way. And I would message the parents, hey, because my students are so young, I would love to see so and so at this time and this day. Make appointments, right? And do that throughout the year, so that I can talk to them and build a rapport and relationship in that way. We do, in a previous episode where I had a principal on, she was talking about being flexible, being creative, being dynamic with our time and our effort as far as building relationships with our students and families. And yes, we need permission to do that, to say, hey, I want you to have a growth mindset, and here's how. But it starts with, yes, like you said, Lee, getting to know that person, and those are a couple of ways I would do that myself. And I would love to hear what other people have to say. Linked to Teachers Help Teachers, there's a Facebook group. I would love to hear what you have to say through comments. Like, how would you cultivate a relationship so that you can encourage a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset? So Lee, before I move on, did you have anything else in response to that? Like, how would you cultivate this growth mindset in a remote classroom setting?
I love your idea of the office hours, because what it really comes down to is it's building that relationship of trust, right? Where your student does not think that they're going to get yelled at for making a mistake, or they're going to somehow, be punished, or it's like a punitive situation where they make a mistake. And without, if you haven't had the experience of a teacher or a family member or parent or someone who thinks, in terms of that growth mindset, because I know growing up when I was a child, you wanted to get 100 on everything. It was always, did you get 100? Did you get 100? And, it's actually okay not to get 100. And so if you don't have that trust with your teacher and your classmates as a community, to know that they're supportive of you and not going to make fun of you when you make mistakes, or say something that's really from the heart, not something that you're out for a laugh, but like something really from the heart, like I genuinely believe that this is my true blue response, and your class is going to erupt in laughter. So and you don't want that's going to be a setback, right? So you want to make sure that you build those relationships between your peers in your class and with your teacher and teacher to student. And so I love that idea of office hours.
Sure. And you know, last episode when you and I were together, we talked about standards-based grading versus traditional grades. And with standards-based grading, where you have that target, learning target, and you're giving them that feedback of, yes, you met it, or not yet. And here's what you should do or you should try next. When you give that kind of feedback, and you could definitely do that remotely, right? I did last 2 weeks, and I actually got work back with those revisions and with those changes. And what I would do next year is have that office hours with that student and go, hey, I love that you worked on it again and resubmitted and met those targets. How did that feel for you? Right? How did it go for you? Did it feel good what did you learn? So I was really, really excited to change my grading to standards-based grading and getting actual revisions and hopefully growth. I did not take that next step of revisiting with that student and asking and having that conversation, but I will next year, because I think that's really, really important to cultivate, again, that growth mindset in our students.
And also, how motivational was that for you to actually, based upon your effort and your feedback, you received, you received something from your student, like your student, in that you knew that your student was now moving along the same path. So you were motivated to sort of maintain that change, and your student was motivated to make that change. So it was really a give and take experience, which is nice because everyone gets something.
And that assignment was a writing assignment, and the last thing you want to hear from your teacher is do the whole thing again, right? So I was very clear about, you don't have to redo it again, you just need to fix that part, and then resubmit it. And by because who wants to hear do the whole thing again? And if I didn't say, hey, I love this part, but you got to work on that part, and just work on that part, if you give them specific guidelines like that, I think you'll get a lot more buy-in. And sometimes if they are way off, they do have to do it again. And maybe, and again, those office hours of needing to clarify something more specific is really important. So let's wrap up, Lee. I wasn't sure if I wanted to ask this question, but during our prep, I admitted that I wasn't sure if I wanted to, but I will, because I loved what you had to say. What do you think is the difference between fixed mindset and having convictions? Do you want to?
Okay. So, it's not so much a difference between one or the other, as what I thought of convictions are that you can have convictions and still be a growth mindset type of person, and that you have moral convictions and convictions about the way that you would like the world to be and the way that you think people should be treated, but it does not mean that you are pegging this person into a hole saying that this is all you'll ever be. Mm-hmm. And so you can have convictions about what you feel is right and wrong in the world or in your own behavior or whatever that may be, but it doesn't mean that you're not open to listening to people and possibly changing your point of view or having a dialogue about, you know, opposing points of view. And so, you know, it's okay to still feel strongly about a point of view and still know that you're a growth minded person. And so that was my conviction. That was what I felt. So yes, how do you feel?
I'm gonna ditto what you said. And on that note, thank you, teachers, for tuning in on this series. We're doing a series on mastery learning and grading. And last time we talked about grading, and this time we just wrapped up and talked about growth mindset versus fixed mindset and how to do that during remote learning. So Lee, thank you so much for joining me again on this series in Teachers Help Teachers. And teachers, I will see you again. And Lee, you have a good one. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.